Mr. McCain, if you would like to call the meeting to order, we'll be prepared with the presentation after you call the meeting to order. And I believe there's some other.
Okay, great. I'm able to do that. Now, since you're sharing, I won't need to turn on my video. Am I still able to? It doesn't look like I'm able to turn on the video.
No, it doesn't. Sorry about that. It looks
Okay,
like just
no worries.
and the host is.
No worries. You all aren't missing anything. Trust me. I call the May 19th, 2021 meeting of the RDA TDD Steering Committee meeting to order.
Okay. All right. Mr. Wellman, can you advance to the next slide? I think it'll be our agenda.
First thing on our agenda is a welcome and the team and committee introductions. I'll start because I think I'm the newest kid on the block. My name is Trent McCain. I'm the Deputy Mayor of the City of Gary. I've been working with the city since January 1, 2020 under the Jerome Prince administration. I started off as Corporation Counsel, and then in December of last year, he promoted me to Deputy Mayor. I've been serving in that capacity full-time since around February this year. I've heard a lot about this committee. I know that Eric Reeves works hard with this committee in terms of working with the RDA and the TDD that's located in Gary. I thank him and I look forward to working with the rest of you while Eric is on leave and tending to himself. So that's all about me. I look forward to learning about my colleagues on the committee.
Great, thank you. I think if the steering committee members, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Scott Jefferson, Town of Dyer representative.
Okay.
Richard Morrisroe, City of East Chicago representative.
Leanne Mellon from the Munster Town Council. I've been serving on the Town Council since 2016.
Yeah, Michael Berry, Town of Porter, Director of Development.
Tim Corcoran, Director of Planning for the City of South Bend.
Brian Poland, representing City of Hammond.
All right, that might be all the members.
That's everyone in attendance. Okay, very good. Well, nice to meet all of you. I look forward to working with you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the February 17th, 2021 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Move acceptance.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we approve the meeting minutes from February 17th, 2021. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries with one abstention. That's coming from me. The next item on our agenda is the update on the progress of the rail projects.
Sure, I can jump in here, and I think we can advance to the next slide. So thank you. Good to be with you all today. Sherry Ziller here, COO for the RDA and also interim CEO. So thank you, Mr. McCain, for being with us today. Looking forward to our continued work together. So today, we do have a presentation for you, and it'll be on the topic of social equity and development as the economy is recovering from an economic and health crisis. We as an RDA wanted to touch on our efforts today to advance a strategy for social equity and share that all with you a little bit later on in the presentation. But as always, I will start with a brief rail projects update. So both rail projects, as I'm sure you all are aware, have achieved the full funding grant agreement status, and they are working, continuing towards progress towards construction. So specifically for Westlake, the update here is design builder. The design builder is continuing with final design and has delivered several design packages for NICD's review for Q1 and Q2. And the right-of-way acquisition continues, the demolition of the residential parcels continues, and that is expected to be complete after this month. So we are in good shape there. And then I'm on to double track. This, I don't know if your screen's looking a little bit different than mine, but I'll keep going as technology catches up here. Double track. The construction work has been divided into 5 construction packages. NICD has completed 2 of those procurements. The lowest bidder has been identified for procurement package number 2, which is the Michigan City Garage. However, that contract is on hold to allow for more TDD discussions to engage a developer for that garage. And then 2 bids were received for the main rail contract, and they, as you would have likely have seen in the media, they've been rejected by the NICD board. Both of them were over budget. So NICD, and working with the RDA and the state, exploring value engineering opportunities, and are looking
I did too. I'm too.
Rebid the procurement.
Okay.
And
So let's do this.
okay, sorry, I think okay.
Hey, join with computer audio.
Sorry, if you're not on mute, can you put it on mute? Let me say that last sentence again. So NICD's exploring the value engineering opportunities, and NICD's looking to rebid the procurement. And the right-of-way acquisition continues to be on schedule. And just kind of an overall update, the American Rescue Plan Active March 2021 included additional federal support for approved FTA projects, and that would include both of our projects here in Northwest Indiana, Westlake and Double Track. Both projects are anticipated to receive additional funding, estimated at $44 million for Westlake and about $24.6 million for Double Track, and the FTA is prepared the guidance on how the funds will be made available for the project. And the RDA, we continue to work with the IFA, Indiana Finance Authority, to assess the impact on the project's financial plans and the funding partners. So that concludes the rail projects updates portion. I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair. And if there aren't any questions, we can move to the next slide, but I'll open it up.
Hi, Sherry.
Are there any questions for Sherry?
Hi, Sherry. This is Tim Corcoran. Just quite curious. The additional funding that you mentioned, does that reduce the obligation for other entities, or is it to make the project better, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think FTA is still preparing that guidance, and we're trying to figure out exactly how that works. I'm not sure that I know the answer today to that question, Tim. I don't know if a member of my team would like to unmute themselves and answer that a little more directly.
Hi, Sherry. This is David Reynolds with Policy Analytics. Good afternoon, or I guess good morning in Central Time. To the question, the additional federal dollars, the guidance that we've gotten to this point from the FTA is that that's going to be a separate grant for the project. The project cost won't go up, so it will be additional funding for the project that we'll be able to use moving forward to deal with any cost overruns or change orders or anything like that.
Okay. Tim, I hope that answered your
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, David, for jumping in. Any other questions? All right, so just a quick update on the TDD boundary and public engagement update. The TDD process, we continue to move forward. You can see what's on the screen. On the East Chicago, Dyer, Munster, Ogden Dunes, and Portage are all either ready for review by the RDA board and the state budget committee, or they're in their final stages of preparation for those reviews. Then we have the Hammond Gateway Station public engagement session that is scheduled for June 9th, and that's going to be a hybrid in-person and virtual event. So we're looking very much forward to that. And then we also hope to hold the public engagement meeting for Michigan City, the Michigan City Station, I should say, in June as well. And then the remaining station areas are in various stages of the process, and we expect work on those will accelerate as we begin to complete the earlier PDDs.
Sherry, this is Brian.
Yeah.
I appreciate you letting me know that it's June 9th. I never did get confirmation back from Aaron, but that is the date that we preferred.
Okay. Yep. If you're okay with it, Brian, then we're okay with it, and we all can make June 9th work if that works for the city of Hammond.
Yeah, that is what's our preferred date. It's just
Right.
you know, not to throw Aaron under the bus, but you know, I just didn't get confirmation back. So.
Okay. Nope. My fault. Sorry. So okay. Yep. So I believe we're good for June 9th then.
Okay, great.
Okay. And we'll start preparing all the materials for that to go out. So okay. Any other questions about the where we're at with the boundary status and the engagement update? Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide here. So, okay, the main topic of this meeting, we'll be discussing the RDA strategy for developing a framework for communities to define equitable development in our districts. So what we wanted to share with you today is, kind of the goal of this is to develop a bottom-up community-driven approach that reflects the wants and the needs of each of our communities, each of our municipalities. And then we want to incorporate this equitable development piece into the larger developer communication and outreach efforts for each individual TDD. So the goal of the process is to really just enable the transformational change, as well as the equitable change that enables our communities to improve their economic growth path. So it's kind of a high-level overview of the remainder of the presentation. So if we can go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to a team member. I'm going to hand it over to Oscar Bedolla. He's from KPMG, and he will begin walking us through that strategy. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that, Sherry. Really excited to be able to present on a topic that I think is so germane to the work that we've been doing, but also taking it one step further. And so what I'm about to walk through, as Sherry suggested, is our thoughts on, helping to develop an equitable framework for the project, and that will support economic growth within the region that is inclusive. By all means, this is something that we'd like to get feedback on. And we're, in addition to laying out our thoughts, we're also laying out ideas around a process that we'll be working with each community, with the realization that each community will define equity and their inclusive community differently. And so we want to be respectful of that. So today, again, sharing our thoughts on the overall process and how we'll facilitate this. So welcome questions and feedback as well as we walk through this. Any initial questions before I jump into this? Okay, great. And then one other thing I just want to mention before I launch into the slides, this is very much a collaborative effort. So members from the team will be sprinkling in as we walk through these slides. So the first slide that you have up on the screen, the idea here is saluting what has happened over the last 18 to 24 months. And so on the heels of that, which is both the converging of an economic and health crisis, we see some really strong opportunities to release a robust strategy around equity. And so on the left-hand side, I won't walk you through all of these data points, but helping to leverage data to make informed decisions. We've been, as you well know, the last 2 years combing through data and working with each community. And as we work through those as we work with those communities through the ideas around TDDs and the TDD boundary, the data has been very forthcoming in telling us a story. And that story, if you look at it, there are some inequities, and they can be sliced in both the state level and within the region. And so here we've just outlined those statistics at a very high level around unemployment. Here suggesting that the unemployment rate is nearly double in some portions of the region compared to the overall state. Housing, great story to tell around home ownership as you start to look at the values associated with some of those homes within submarkets. Those tend to fluctuate. So an opportunity to create stronger equity there as well. And then the poverty rate, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. If we look at that and then in context of trends, which, again, as we drive economic development, we want to be thinking about what the future state of Northwest Indiana looks like. There are two major trends that we think we should salute and be cognizant of. One, advancing equity. With the new administration in place, there are changes within the federal regulations that are supporting more equitable investments at the federal level. And so by rolling out a strategy here, not only will it serve the local market, but it might also help us to align with those changes so that as we think about future opportunities around federal funding, whether it be through HUD or other programs, this could put us in a good position for that. Inclusive communities, I know everyone on this call is close to this. And so this is a trend that we think has just been accelerated with the pandemic as people think about different uses, a diversity of those uses, and the people that live within communities. And so this isn't anything new. We're just suggesting that it's been heightened as a result of what has gone over, what's come to fruition over the last 18 to 24 months. Next slide. So before we walk into kind of our thoughts on the framework, we wanted to also just salute, as the steering committee knows, the work that we've been doing over the last 2 years. And so working with Policy Analytics, obviously RDA, MKSK, have been very much trying to facilitate a process around planning that's inclusive. And so that's why we've led with meeting with communities, hearing from those communities, testing ideas, and then using those to inform where the boundaries are. And so wanted to, again, walk through this at a very high level, but what you can see here are kind of the big buckets of the things that the team has been doing to facilitate an inclusive process. So chronicalizing, really just taking the data around the current state, making sure that we're being responsive to the needs, promoting community engagement, all the way down to thinking about public policy associated with investments and how we will work with the communities to attract private investment. Next slide. So here what we're seeing is an emerging trend, not just within our region, but the idea of defining what equitable transit-oriented development is doing. So our partners in Chicago have recently laid out a strategy around equitable development around TODs. We've been working on this for the last 2 years, so it isn't something new to us, but we think as we start to talk to the communities and the residents within those communities, it would be good to help define what TODs are. And so here we've just sprinkled in at a macro level what that means, because we know that the definition for equitable transit-oriented development can be very different. And so that means different things to different people. Next slide. And so putting that into context, if we just double click on that, I think these are kind of the building blocks. And so the things that we might help to create within each community and tangible results of the outcome of the work that we might do. And we'll talk about that process and how we will align resources to solve for these. And so as we work with each community, we want to work with them to define what equity is. And so that might look very different in Hammond versus Gary. And so being able to understand what those building blocks could include we've outlined some illustrative examples based on the work that we've done to date and the conversations we've had. So that could be, stronger engagement, inclusive communities, thinking about how we can promote diversity, accessible development for those people that are, challenged at accessing buildings. And so thinking about curb cuts and thinking about infrastructure that supports accessibility, public health, resiliency, and even equitable housing. Any questions there? It looks like we're having some challenges with the screen, but anything anyone wants to add in from the team as well?
If I may, Richard Morris, are these, were these part of the process during the Trump administration, or have they been added in with the arrival of the Biden administration?
Yeah, Richard, let me take a stab at that, and I can turn to Sherry and others. I think what we're suggesting is, from the first slide, there are changes at the federal level. I think as it relates to the work we've been working with RDA and the communities, this has just been a theme that we've been working around inclusiveness from day one, regardless of the political administration. I think what we're suggesting is that there is an opportunity, as there are changes now at the federal level through the Biden administration, as they think about funding and programs that might provide additional capital to initiatives like this. And so taking one step back, I think what the Biden administration is thinking through now is, the connectivity of, not just physical infrastructure that is road and bridges, but thinking about how you can develop more sustainable communities by connecting transit, housing, and technology like fiber together collectively. And so I think there's a really strong story to tell here. And so we're suggesting that we were already doing this work. It's really taking a step back and making sure that we're articulating the work that we're doing, but then also putting a focus on, how these communities would like to define equity. And in the slides that I'm about to walk through, we walk through a framework on how we solve for that. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, appreciate that. And great question, by the way. Any other questions? I think Bill's on. As we were developing these slides, I thought Bill brought up a really good point around, how the legislation and the House bill was agile and allowed some flexibilities to support this overall effort as well. I don't know if Bill wants to add that before we jump into the next slide.
Well, I just, thank you, Oscar. This is Bill Sheldrick. I would just say the structure of the legislation from 2017 that the Indiana General Assembly put in place does allow for effectively for TIFs, which has been around for 30 years, more than 30 years, allows that structure to be used for this kind of equitable development. So I think that's the thing that Oscar emphasized. We have more flexibility and financing from the federal government now, and we also have, as we get it further into this, we also have financial resources, financial structures really that we can use from the state as well. Go ahead, Oscar.
Thanks. So again, the big takeaway from this slide is, one, we anticipate and we know from our conversations today that everyone will define equity differently, right? So we will allow those communities to define what works for them. And then the framework on the next slide, if you don't mind going to the next one, Dave, will be our approach to helping work with those communities to solve for this, right? So a very collaborative process, similar to what we've done from the planning process, but this focused on where are the opportunities. And so if you think about this, the graphic on the left-hand side is a wheel, and starting with quantifying inequities. And if you go clockwise, we kind of walk through our process for solving for that. So we've done a lot to date, again, identifying and using data to document the current state. We've shown some of the data on the first slide around where we think there are opportunities and variations in the data that need to be addressed. The next piece is around understanding the barriers, right? And so each community will have different barriers and different challenges. And so as we start to identify those, then we can think about how we can bring resources to bear to solve for those barriers. We then think, this is such a challenge that will require integration. And so Sherry can talk about some of the work we're talking about doing about integrating with other different programs, whether at the local level, thinking about federal resources and also state resources to help solve for these things. Again, aligning resources and planning efforts so that we're strategically aligned. That will then allow us to foster partnerships, right? So thinking through whether it's a partnership in the community with small business or a partnership with private developers, again, focused on the development lens here, we can start to articulate to all those partners what we're trying to solve for, and then targeting those resources. The outer ring here is what we refer to, and this is totally consultant talk, but enablers. And so these are the things that our team and the skill sets that we bring to bear that can help facilitate this process. So data analysis, again, transparency, using the opportunity to meet with the steering committee to present and keep you up to date on the things that we're doing, as well as building transparency with our public meetings and our websites, or the website to inform the community about what we're doing. Educating people on what equity is, whether it's helping people articulate what they're doing, but then also, kind of advocating for that by using our tools in our toolbox to build awareness is the other piece. So again, this is kind of the process as we see it to help identify and define equity, but then also align resources to help solve for it for the communities. And the resources we're talking about mainly here, again, are the proceeds from the TDD revenues. So the incremental funds that will be created from the districts that we're drawing. Next slide. So I've kind of walked through this, but this, I think people pick things up differently. So if you're more visual around steps and an ordered process, I won't walk this in detail, but I think this is a great takeaway for the team. If you wanted to see how we might step through this process with each of the communities. Again, the big piece here is, whether it's virtual or in person, we would be working with each community to define equity and align those resources as I on the framework. Next slide. And so here we're going to just walk through an illustrative example of how we might facilitate this. Again, with the idea that funding would come from the TDD itself, both property and income tax. Can you go to the next slide, please? So to help facilitate this process, we anticipate and hope that there will be a large cohort of different projects at each community. So let's take Gary or Hammond, for instance. So working with that local team, we would help to identify with them the proposed projects that fall within the TDD project. And so if we walk through this graphic, potentially you have 4 or 5 different projects that come in. We would do this initial assessment. This assessment would be on the heels of us defining what equity is. Again, we've already been working with the communities to understand what their needs are around development. And so we would, kind of screen those projects with the community to say, what's the just strategic fit? What are the financial metrics? What are the risks? Putting a strong process in place so that we're meeting our goals, but then also identifying projects that meet the appetite of the community with RDA support. From there, you kind of a selection criteria, drilling down into that more, and then prioritizing the projects, right? We anticipate that within these communities, there'll be a number of different projects. And so there'll be a need to prioritize which ones get funded first, and then working through implementation. As you can see at the bottom of the slide here, we've identified and realized that this is much more complex, but understanding what the equity, defining equity and what the goals are of each community, we would use those to guide that process. So aligning with your priorities, identifying the community benefits, your return on investment, your equity position, et cetera. Any questions there? Great. Next slide. And so this is a takeaway. I don't know if my colleagues from MKSK are on, but as we've been thinking about how our approach here as the collective team, we wanted to do it in concert with best practices, with the realization that we would need to tailor those best practices to meet Northwest Indiana's needs. And so here are just some illustrative examples. I'll walk you through just two, unless others want to chime in. But one that we thought was really interesting is 16 Tech. And this is actually based in Indianapolis. Bob Coy is leading this effort. And really they're creating an innovation hub. So slightly different than what we're talking about, but could be an opportunity for the region. The idea here, though, is the community is in front and center. And so all the benefits that they're bringing to the community, they are making sure that they're inclusive of the community, whether it's classes, whether it's technology, opportunities to network with other entrepreneurs. The idea and principle here that creating a live, work, play, and inclusive community is the big takeaway here. And so a best practice in Indiana and something that we think could be an opportunity as we think about development within the different communities.
Hey, and Oscar, this is Aaron Kowalski from MKSK. I am on the line, and apologies for being a few minutes late to this meeting, everyone. I had an overlapping meeting. In addition to kind of what Oscar has featured here, there are a couple case studies on the right that are actually projects that we've been involved with. And the reason we wanted to include those is they demonstrate different scales of development. The Woodbridge Neighborhood Development Project is in Detroit, the Woodbridge neighborhood. And we actually worked with the neighborhood association as well as the city of Detroit to create a plan for a number of kind of smaller scale development sites around bus lines in the community. And we then worked with them after the plan was completed to establish an RFP that they then shopped around to the development community. And there are several projects coming into fruition for kind of mixed income housing within this area. So that was a really successful instance of a community plan that resulted in direct investment in a community. And at a small scale, this is something that we think is relevant to many Northwest Indiana communities. So a good case study to look at. And then the other one I'll feature is the Akron Neighborhood Revitalization. We've been involved for a number of years in both downtown Akron and a number of other neighborhoods. And they had a foundation that sponsored business development, civic engagement, and housing access. And there were local groups that, really put through good planning, 5 to 10 year land use visions for each neighborhood centered around immediate and long-term improvements. And what has resulted there has really been a transformation of sort. It's both on a community level, but then also on an economic development level. They've been able to, through a number of incentives, attract people to live in the downtown core, as well as some of the core neighborhoods that had seen a lot of disinvestment over the years. So those are a couple case studies that would be good for you all to take a look at. Like I said, they may not be applicable to every community we're looking at in Northwest Indiana, but as we think about these kinds of projects and how, equity and inclusion can be thought of as a component or a lens to see investment, these are a couple examples that I wanted to feature. Oscar, I'll turn it back to you.
I appreciate that. I think you did a great job of highlighting those. I think the last one is just the last case study around the Oregon Metro. Is the opportunity to use the data and maybe release some of it publicly as we start to track our progress. And so, again, just another example of a group that's developing policies that are data informed by data, but allowing that information to be public as well. So just, again, something for you guys to noodle on. But again, the team is very much looking at what's going on in the market and trying to use that to inform kind of our overall process. Any questions? I think we have one or two more slides, but I'm going to make sure we're addressing any questions from the team. So I think we've already started to reach out to folks to start, having conversations and walking people through this process. So I'll turn it back to Sherry if there's any last comments on this, and then I think we have a few additional slides.
No, thank you, Oscar. I know that you've already asked for questions, but certainly if there are any, please let us know. You can contact us afterwards if you'd like to speak specifically about your community. But like I said earlier, the goal of the process, is to enable the transformational changes that the TDDs can and will bring, as well as incorporating the equitable changes that Oscar was talking about that really enables our communities to continue to improve their economic growth path with incorporating this thinking. So with that, if we can go to the next slide, I'm going to hand it over to Aaron Kowalski to talk about the online engagement.
Thanks, Sherry. So we've had a lot of success with nwitdd.com. As you can see, as of last week, we have 3,300 unique visitors and 10,700 page views. Well, so what that means is a couple things. It means we're reaching a lot of folks in a lot of different communities across Northwest Indiana, and people are coming back and viewing the page multiple times. So we feel really good about this as we continue to work with communities. I know at the onset of this meeting, we talked a little bit about Hammond, an upcoming meeting there. There's also going to be an upcoming meeting in Michigan City that we're working to set the date on. We hope to have a lot more visitors to this site over the summer. And then as we continue to engage with Northwest Indiana communities, this is a really good place for dissemination of information as well as an alternative means of engagement and kind of the ability to be really transparent about this process, to have videos for the various meetings, as well as information about both the TDD boundaries and then planning as it occurs in the communities.
I have a question.
Please.
Can you tell me whether or not this is, forgive the newness of this type of question,
Sure.
but can you tell me what the level of engagement is with our partners, our members, in terms of, let's use the city of Gary, for example. Is the city of Gary partnering with the RDA in order to publicize this website to draw traffic to it?
So I think that's a great question. And to be honest, you all are really good partners in this website. We have, as we looked at the Miller area of Gary, we had good success with the city of Gary posting information on your all social media as well as your website, pointing folks to this site as really a repository of information. As we interacted in the past, as we continue to interact with you in the future, we think there's going to be a lot more opportunities to continue to build this site. We've designed this site in a way that it is a really flexible platform. So as, you know, for instance, real projects start to happen, this is a place where the public can learn about those projects and can learn about the interplay between community and economic development within these TDD districts. So to answer your question, yes, we've had a great partnership with the city of Gary. You all have been wonderful in publicizing information as we have upcoming meetings. We've also been engaging kind of at a staff level with a number of folks within your development department and economic development department, kind of on a one-on-one level and group level to kind of determine opportunities in the area. And that's really how we're interacting with all the different communities in Northwest Indiana, is kind of through this flexible approach of getting together in small group meetings with people, having those community engagement meetings, and of course, posting as much information as possible to the websites, including answers to any questions that the public may have.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
It does indeed. I'm very happy to hear that. And I just want to reiterate that we stand ready to even strengthen that partnership by getting the word out. We have a pretty popular social media presence, bubbling under 8,000 or so followers. And our website needs new content all the time to stay relevant. So anything that we can do, let us know.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Any other questions about our online presence and online engagement with our communities and the website and the views and visitors? Okay, Aaron, thanks for walking us through that. So I think we can probably go to the next slide here, which is our last slide. So the next steps for us is to continue the planning work with our communities and then continue to work towards finalizing our TDD boundaries and get that in front of the RDA Board of Directors for review and also to the State Budget Committee. And we'll continue working on that, and we'll have more to report on at our next steering committee meeting, which is scheduled for August 18th.
Thank you. Before we conclude, I'd like to ask a question about the second bullet point. And I just wanted to get a status on the City of Gary's request to remove a couple of areas from our TDD.
Sure, I believe.
If you think that's more appropriate for us to talk about offline, I'll defer to you.
Sure. Well, I can say that I know that I believe 2 parcels have been requested to be removed, and I believe we have complied with that request. And
Great.
Yeah, they've been removed. So I think we're good there.
Thank you very much.
Sure, sure. And we will we'll be happy to follow up with you, and we can show you a map
Thank you.
of the revised boundary.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, any other questions? All right, Mr. Chair, that concludes our presentation. So thank you.
Thank you very
Okay, over
much.
to you.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation by all of the speakers this morning. If there are no further questions, or does anyone wish to make any comments? I don't see it on the agenda, but I'm inviting the body to make any comments if they so choose. Hearing and seeing none, we stand adjourned. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.